Thanks for clicking on this video despite the crappy title. I wanna share my opinion that a lot of self-proclaimed software architects use microservices in an inappropriate way. This video will be highly opinionated and I'm sorry in advance for exaggerating. Let's start with the question. Do microservices suck? No, I love the concept of microservices. In my opinion, they solve a lot of problems that monoliths have. They make deploying services and collaborating on projects easier, and it's easier to draw a boundary between apps in microservice world. So why am I making this video then? Well, the problem I have with microservices, as I do with any other model/pattern, is that people sometimes think that that model will do the thinking instead of them. Although this is sometimes fine, for example, if you're asked to click subscribe, you can just click it. Let's start with looking at what are some of the advantages of microservices. Fault isolation, better scalability, faster deployment times, and better productivity as a team. Now this all sounds neat, but unfortunately if you don't use your head, these advantages might fade away before you can say Kubernetes. What I've seen people do is that instead of mashing stuff that contextually belongs together as a start, they start thinking in terms of bajillion requests per second and forget the actual problem they need to solve. If you need to have an app that cooks food, you don't necessarily need to have a separate pressure cooker, oven, microwave and fryer services. And don't even get me started on using storage and API as separate services. If you do that, I'm not sure what to tell you, dude. As a start, why don't you just put these services into a single microservice and don't complicate things for yourself? Sure, when your product scales to an unimaginably large number of requests and you'll need to support more functionalities, then it might make sense to split the service more. But guess what? You can also logically split code across packages in a single microservice. If you do that, then pulling a part of the codebase out and putting it into its own microservice won't be a challenge. Having a logical app be a combination of 5 repositories instead of 1 is something not to be taken lightly in my opinion. In our example of these 5 services, what I've seen happen is that these services that cook food are a lot of times very tightly coupled with the other ones. In this case, guess what? Your better scalability turned out into, I did a small change, now I need to deploy 5 services at the same time. Fault isolation turned into harder debugging and team productivity turned into, well, poop. Now to be fair, how you split your app depends on a lot of factors, including how big your team is. As I said before, I love microservices as a concept, and the message I want to send to you is that you can cut the services in a lot of ways, and treating each class as its own microservice is almost never a good idea. Our example might still be better off in form of 2 microservices. For example, one to process the orders and one to cook the foods. But I don't know, the guy who defined these requirements is a total moron. And that brings me to the next topic, moronic requirements. I mean, requirements that aren't well defined. One question, are requirements for your project well defined? No! Well, I feel like everywhere you go, requirements are constantly changing. And let me just ask you this, if the requirements for our cooking app change in the middle of the project, what is the architecture you'd rather be working on at that time? This or this? As someone using a Go most of the time, I can say that I love the mentality of what I call CDD, chaos-driven development, or it might also be called crap-driven development, I forgot. This is a way of writing software when you aren't even sure what you want and you put everything in a single function first, so your code legit looks like someone took a dump on it. And once it works, you refactor it once, requirements change, refactor it again and again, until it's so clean you could lick it and not even get sick. A similar approach could be used almost everywhere. What I mean by similar approach is that start simple and build on top. Only when requirements start getting complicated, start complicating your codebase. It's easier to go from simple to complex than the other way around. That said, you still need a feeling for when to draw the line. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense to do what I just said. In that case, I suggest that you use your head and stop listening to some random guy on YouTube. Alright, one more rant, then I'm done, I promise. Fact or fiction? Is an app made of 5 microservices more scalable than the same app implemented in just 1 microservice? Well, it depends on the context of course, but let me just say this, more shattered architecture doesn't necessarily mean better scalability. To illustrate what I mean, let's return to our cooking example. Let's say that our microwave service will need to handle 100 times more requests than all others combined. And you know that's bound to happen. It's true that in the case of shattered architecture, you could increase the number of replicas of just the microwave service to say 5 and leave others be. But if there aren't any other restrictions, there is nothing wrong with scaling a single service to say 8 replicas. And if you think that's inefficient, well, even if all replicas of the single service almost exclusively handle the microwave requests and the rest of the service isn't doing anything, what's inefficient about that? To me, it looks like the only inefficient thing is that you deploy a 20 megabyte binary 8 times instead of an 18 megabyte one 5 times. Is binary size really an issue? Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. I'd be glad to also hear your take on this topic. Have you seen anything similar happen in practice? As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you again. Bye!